Okay, so to start off, my favorite passage was when Baba had explained to Amir what the only sin in life was, and that was theft. And he said, now, no matter what the mullah teaches, there's only one sin, only one, and that is theft. Every other sin is a variation of theft. Do you understand that? It was an interesting moment for me that it was funny to see the juxtaposition between teachers and what Baba thought, because usually teachers are held at a position of respect because they are educating children. And the way Baba had completely defied them, I think, showed his power, and especially his power through Amir's eyes. Amir really looked up to him and believed what he said. And it was just, I really liked the juxtaposition of it. And it was funny because at the same time, we find out later in the book that Baba had stole many things. And it was interesting for him to speak so highly of those who do not steal, when at the same time he was committing that sin many of times.
Yeah, it really, to me, it was just kind of weird how he lied about all that to Amir, and how it just kind of changed Amir's perception of what his father was and who he was as a man.
At the end.
Yeah, at the end of the book, it kind of changes how he looked at life and how he looked at his father, and how they sort of became more similar than different.
Yeah.
How they started out very differently at the beginning, and they sort of came together at the end in the same way.
But in a negative form, because they kind of were finally reunited on an emotional level because of the sins they had committed, which isn't really what most people would look for, but the fact that they had just connected was interesting, that they finally got that relationship through sin. It's just...
Yeah.
It just shows
what
the
I found really
difference.
weird was basically how Amir looked up to his father his entire life, and he wanted his approval, and at the same time he wanted to do that with Hassan. Hassan was always looking up to Amir, and so it was sort of conclusive in a way, because while Amir was looking up to his father, Hassan was looking up to Amir, and Amir had basically been living a lie as well. And so it was so strange to see two of those connections so interrelated, because it was on the same level, because Amir basically lived a sin his whole life, that one sin where he did not help Hassan. And it was the same thing for Baba, where he was the father of Hassan.
And it's, for going on the father point, I don't know why Baba never really took, parental guardian over Hassan, because really in the characterization of Amir and Hassan always was looked at as higher in Baba's eyes, but yet Baba never revealed that he was his real father. And I think that was also a loyalty to Ali, which also kind of shows there was a true relationship between Ali and Baba, but at the same time, Amir and Hassan they had somewhat of the same relationship, but it was also intertwined with lies.
Well, what I'm wondering is if, because Baba always looked out for Hassan, I'm wondering if it would have been the same exact thing if Hassan wasn't actually his son, if he was Ali's son.
Well, I think it was different because, what was it, Baba, he had to, the only thing you have in Afghanistan, they said, was respect and pride, and having a son out of wedlock with a Hazara woman, having a Hazara boy, would have
Everybody would have looked down on him.
Yeah, everyone would have looked down on him and looked at him as an evil man, like a bad man who committed these sins, and he would have lost the respect that he had gained throughout the years of hard work of helping others and helping people gain better lives. So it was kind of to save himself, but so then at the same time he can go and help others. And it's kind of just like this cultural identity they have in Afghanistan, which could be seen as different from the United States. Because
Yeah. I don't know, I think if anyone in the story had the most respect in my eyes, it'd probably be Hassan, because, he always would say anything for you, and he would always do everything just completely without a second thought about himself. And he was always looked down upon by other people, but in all reality, he was one of the most morally right and morally high-sounding people in the book.
Well, I agree with you, but I don't think that he had a whole lot of choice. I think he was born into that. I think he was born into being into blind loyalty, and even though he had a choice, it was a small choice, and in the end, like, he had to pay for that.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the characters that I related to the most was Hassan, or that I enjoyed, because he had such great loyalty, and he just built this great friendship with Amir that he thought he had.
Mm-hmm.
But he was always there for him, always saying 1,000 times over for you, and he kind of gave Amir the best gift he could get, which was the kite after the tournament.
Yeah.
He ran the kite for him so he could finally gain that sort of feeling of love and respect from Baba that he had been lacking, but that Amir thought he was giving to Hassan.
Yeah.
So Hassan kind of gave him the ultimate gift of Baba's love and support and respect, which is what Amir really wanted at the time.
But then, I think when he finally gained, Baba's love and all that affection, he truly didn't want it because he couldn't really share it with Hassan. I think even though all those times when, they would go out and picnic and stuff, and, Hassan could skip a rock further than Amir would always just display this jealousy because Baba was, patting Hassan on the back and telling him he did a great job. But at the same time, I think when Baba gave him that full-on respect and it was just for him, he didn't really, want it as much because he had all this turmoil with Hassan. And I think that if he maybe had it interjected when they were in the alley, something would have changed and he would have been more, welcoming to Baba's love, and he wouldn't have regretted it so much.
Well, I wonder if he left Hassan in the alley out of jealousy or out of contempt towards him, or if he just didn't know what to do, if he was so afraid that he couldn't make the correct choice.
Well, I don't know, because it's hard to put yourself in that situation and compare what you would do to what Amir did, because none of us, hopefully, have ever been in that situation. But at the same time, it's, there's always going to be a right and a wrong thing to do, but I think standing there and just doing nothing it makes you just as culpable as the people doing it. Because I don't know how, I know you can be scared of getting hurt, but they had all those people ganging up against Hassan, and Amir just watched.
Yeah, I think Amir was pretty hard on himself too about it throughout the years, because he always kept holding on to that moment.
Well, that was his one grudge.
His one defining moment in life. But, I mean, he always thought of himself as a coward because he thought Baba thought he was a coward, and he thought Baba had no respect for him.
Well, in the end, with that one moment, he proved to be a coward, I think.
Well,
indefinitely.
I feel like he made up for it, though. I feel like eventually...
See, that's the real question. Did he eventually atone his sins?
I feel like he did, because when he went to go and save Hassan's son, Sarab, right? That was his own choice. Like, even though his father had passed away and he had nobody else to look out for, like, that was his one thing. And he even said that if he didn't make the choice right then and there, then he wouldn't have been able to do it. And so...
Well, that would also display his cowardliness.
Well, right,
he didn't
but
want to do it.
He pushed through, and he eventually said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to go and try and make up for my sins and do the best that I can. And I think that right there was what he needed to do, and anything else, any other choice besides that one would have left him for the rest of his life guilty.
Yeah, it kind of shows, when he makes that decision later on in life, how he has grown as a person and, matured, and how going to America and just lessons that Baba had taught him throughout life finally had maybe started kicking in. Now he had finally grown as a person into someone who he could respect himself.
I don't know, I would have to disagree. I really don't think, he did save Hassan's son. He saved his own, what Hassan would have loved the most. But at the same time, it almost ended in tragedy. He finds Sarab in the bathtub and he had slit his wrist. What if he had died? How would he would have had more sin. But even though he was trying his hardest to get Sarab back into the United States, I still think that part of him is a coward. And just the way, I remember that one passage where he said that when Asaph was beating him up, when he was trying to gain back Sarab or get him to come with him, it was like he finally felt at peace because someone was finally beating him up. But why does pain equalize what had happened to Hassan? Why didn't he just step in then and feel the pain when they were in the alley instead of waiting?
Because he was
so many years later.
Because he was a child.
He couldn't make the choice. He couldn't make the choice at the alley.
Because he's a coward.
And then he wanted his son to make him feel guilty later on in the book.
Yeah, and then he torments him. He's horrible to him. This person who would need as much emotional support as they can after having this horrible thing happen to them. He's horrible. He pushes pomegranates in his face. He's nothing like a friend. He instead turns into an enemy when Hassan has no one.
Right, but what else could he have done to make up for those sins? What's the most unselfish thing he could have done? And
he could have stepped in. He could have done something.
Yeah, at that point in time, after he'd gone to America, when he came back, that was the most unselfish thing that he could have done, and he did that.
True, but...
Yeah, I mean, what you just said could be used as an example of how he had grown, how he had become someone who had pride and bravery in himself. I mean, going into the middle of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan,
and going
to see people getting
people
beheaded and killed in front of thousands, and then going in and meeting one of the top leaders of like the Taliban at the time in Asaph. I mean, that's pretty ballsy.
But at the same time, if you would remember what Hassan always did for Amir, Hassan always stood up for Amir no matter what. And Hassan always had the courage. So I think Amir had the potential to learn how to be courageous. He just didn't want to be.
But he eventually did.
But, it's too little too late in my mind.
Well, Hassan still lived, I mean. And
he died.
But he lived after.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
Well, but still. I don't know.
I think Hassan was such a good friend. He knew who Amir was so well that he didn't really hold a grudge against Amir for not helping out. And he knew that he was watching. I think he knew that and knew how much he wanted the kite and how much he wanted Baba's love, that he was willing to do this and not tell Baba or anyone else about what happened. So he was willing to give up his life, Hazara's life, which he thought maybe his life was less than Amir's. He was willing to give it up so Amir could be better off.
I don't know, I still disagree.
I mean, I feel like he made up for sins, and that's my favorite section in the book, is where he finally takes down Asaph with Sarab's help. And I feel like when they're in the truck and when they're leaving the compound, I feel like he comes full around, and he realizes like he's done the best that he can to make up for what he did previously.
But I don't get why physical pain is what equalizes sin. Why did he have to be beat up by Asaph to feel equalized? He was already, I think, if you look at it from a moral perspective, Asaph was on a morally lower level than Amir and Hassan, because he's sitting there, controlling the Taliban. He had been like that his whole entire life. He had been that, horrible bully kid around, the neighborhood. But why couldn't Amir just look past the fact that he was morally higher than them, but instead he had to be, physically beaten to feel like he had finally done something? Why couldn't he have just, verbally done something or told someone about what had happened to Hassan? Why couldn't he have why did it have to be?
Maybe he wanted to feel the pain Hassan had felt. Possibility.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
everyone's different.
But do you think because Baba always said that, he would quote, or he would talk about to Ramin Khan when Amir wasn't there, and he would say, why is Hassan always fighting his battles? Do you think Baba would have approved of Amir finally fighting that last battle?